Hello, everyone, and welcome to the August 29th edition of the Product Analytics Group Sync. It's a small crowd today, so should be nice and cozy. But as far as getting things started, we have the board review, but I think since it's just the three of us, I think we can just do a quick stand-up style thing, and then we can go from there, just to not run through a bunch of issues that may not have had any movement yet. We'll follow through async and see if there's anything we need to follow up on, but been seeing some things that I need to respond to, Alan, one of them, including yours. So hopefully we can discuss that today, or I can follow up with that after. But I can go ahead and start. So my focus still continues to be the same. So ClickHouse Cloud is working. I have a cluster set up now specifically for instrumenting GitLab.com. That's running off of a lot of unmerged code because there's some changes required to allow the configurator to actually communicate with ClickHouse Cloud in terms of setting up different tables and things like that. So my goal for this for the next day or so is to really push those MRs so that it's officially official as far as ClickHouse Cloud support is concerned. But at the same time, barring some secrets management setup stuff that I'm trying to work with infrastructure on, we should be able to connect to GitLab.com hopefully soon. So exciting stuff there. In the meantime, I'm still continuing to push the conversations with the infrastructure review as far as our production readiness. I'm trying to follow up with AppSec to kind of see if they have everything they need to conduct a full review. They haven't responded since I said that I'd be happy to send them data and things like that. So again, just continuing to figure out if there's any blockers or anything I can do to help expedite the approval process for us to start to onboard external customers. I think that about covers my side of things. Who wants to go next?
I can go. Speaking of external customers, had a meeting with one today. They are ready. We have a list of projects that we can flip. Told them the soonest we would do that would be next week. And once we're ready, we'll let them know that we flip them and kind of talk them through, or be able to be available for a sync call to talk through the setup. But shared with them all of the SDKs, so they're going to start looking at instrumentation. So really exciting there. I pinged in channel, and my only issue, I think, in the milestone is around brainstorming for customer feedback methods. We've already merged an MR to add a link to the feedback issue in the docs. And I'll start creating issues, hopefully after we get some voting from the team this week for other methods for that. And that rolls up to one of our OKRs. Otherwise, I'm mostly working on things for feature fulfillment work, trying to get all of our ducks in a row.
Gotcha. No, it'll be, I mean, I guess if anything, and I'll add it to the idea just to make sure if we do end up having calls with them kind of, whatever, 4, 6, 8 weeks after they've gotten set up and things like that, it'd be good to see if we can get engineering involved as well to maybe help answer the questions in terms of like what's possible and what's not. If there's any suggestions or feedback that we can kind of help out with there. I did also forget one thing. I was just talking to Basti about it this morning. Sorry to jump back to mine. With all of the event pipeline disruptions we've been having due to bad events or missing columns and things like that, there are some settings that we should be able to tweak in ClickHouse to allow it to skip rows or pieces of data it's erroring on. I have to validate whether that solution is going to work or not, because this is more about importing a large batch of data through like a data blob and allowing to skip the erroneous rows and continuing down the rest of them, and defining like error ratios before ClickHouse will throw an exception. I don't know how that applies, as I mentioned before, how in-cluster ClickHouse works in terms of it pulling the events from Kafka, whether that would still respect those settings. So I have to do some testing to make sure that that all works. But assuming it does, that means the ClickHouse server, I mean, obviously we still want to validate things and properly categorize things in the bad topic in Kafka. And deal with it appropriately there. But in the case that it does get to ClickHouse and it does cause issues, ClickHouse should hopefully be able to then move on past those bad events, and we'll have a little bit more resiliency there. So I'm going to investigate that and maybe see if I think Khalil's jumping back in a couple of days from his time off, so maybe he can look into that if I don't get to it. Cool. Then Alan, I know you already kind of put one in the async chat, but would you like to share anything as far as what you're working on, or if you have any blockers?
I don't have any blockers right now. Sorry. My daughter started back to school, so I got the first bug. The main thing I wanted to bring up was the setup issues once someone sets up product analytics at the instance level, then goes to set up at the project level, then goes back to the instance level. That doesn't work right now. We want to fix it, obviously. My main question is, and you're more familiar with the production infrastructure setup here. Could we possibly just grab the application ID from the database and then reset it back in the GitLab main database? Because that gets rid of a lot of the data retention and switching issues, right? And so I wanted to get an answer on that. That's the only thing that's like kind of blocking, but otherwise I'm just kind of working on beta bugs. So
For sure. No, I think it's possible. Actually, I think one of the issues that analytics instrumentation is working on right now is actually being able to store the or actually keep track of the IDs, because one of the concerns I had was, but I mean, we're generating random strings as the application IDs, or that's great, but at some point, if this kicks off wildly and we have so many people using it, there's potentially a possibility for collisions. And so I wanted to make sure that we can keep track of that so that we can avoid that problem. And then to your point, then we should be able to just query that and say, hey, for this namespace ID, here's the application ID that we're using. That would support further future use cases eventually if for some reason they need to reset it or rotate it or anything like that. So I think they're already working on that. I'll find the issue and ping you on it. But if that simplifies things for you, then I don't see why we couldn't kind of take that approach.
yeah, that also gets rid of the whole database already exists error, right? Which is something
Right.
we handle very well right now.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah, just send me that issue and I'll see where they're at. And
Cool. Yeah, no, I'll chase after that one. But cool. Then that concludes our quick little stand up then. Thanks for humoring me on that. Where are we? Where's the agenda? I've lost it.
oh, the other thing I would say is that James, I'm happy to work on that GraphQL rename issue. That seems like a pretty straightforward grep replace. So
Yeah, no, I guess we can jump to that real quick since the on topic, but there's a Beyond has called out an issue for renaming our current GraphQL resources from product analytics to something more generic, given that we have optimized onboarding and using those endpoints as well, and then hopefully others will follow suit. Since we're behind a feature flag and don't have to respect the versioning rules in terms of what we can break in terms of API changes, I do think it's potentially something we want to prioritize sooner rather than later. Of course, we're still trying to get out to external customers and this and that, but James, I wanted to get your thoughts on that before moving
Yeah,
people on it.
yeah, I'm happy to pull this one into beta release and even 16.4.
Cool.
And then if we want, so just the issue we were talking about before, the project level and the instance level cluster, all of .com is going to be at an instance level cluster. Anyone who onboards is going to be onboarding in the right order of things. Where this might become an issue then is if you have a project that you've onboarded to .com, and then you roll your own cluster and you want to connect to that one for the project. So
Right.
until we offer bring your own cluster, users shouldn't get into this state. Is that saying that would be somewhat true?
Yes, they shouldn't.
Okay.
So it's anytime, yeah, they need to change connected clusters, right? So it's not just bring your own. If we eventually offer more regions, or I know private's a far way out, but like anytime they have to move off of what is the default option in the instance level, and I know that we'll look at more region capabilities probably as the one that's most likely to happen in the near or the medium term.
Yeah.
That's where things can potentially go haywire as well. So by being able to query the application ID, I think we'll be able to just basically be able to keep it up to date based on whatever cluster you're connected to at whatever level.
yeah, I would say that the only possible way I could see someone getting into this on GitLab.com is if we roll out bring your own cluster for them and then they want to turn that off. Then they will be in this problem. But that obviously that's an exception. We don't want to, that's not like a happy path.
I would then roll this instead of in the beta epic into the bring your own cluster epic or into GA if we decide that part of GA is going to be additional regions for data storage.
Right.
At that point, it would be a use case that we need to support for that functionality. But for beta, I don't think we do, since we're only offering the managed stack.
The only concern is, so I lean more towards if we can put it into GA, just because, especially once we start getting these stacks deployed into the infrastructure managed environments, it's not going to be, at least I don't believe it's going to be easy for me to just jump into any of the pods and like get us unstuck. So for example, if we're instrumenting GitLab.com and using a separate cluster for that, and for whatever reason we need to reconnect that and we get stuck in this state, then that becomes a much more involved task, like getting infrastructure engineers to do what I need, what I would normally be doing in terms of like
Yeah.
resetting up that. So again, yeah, I agree. Like it's not something that people need right now. That they're not going to be asking for it. But it was, and I only encountered it because I was switching clusters at like such a frequent rate than probably most people should be. Um, but I think it will help make our lives easier if we can kind of address it sooner rather than later. But like GA, like that's fine. If that's the
Yeah,
case,
let's
which
roll it
should,
into GA, maybe push it out a milestone and bring in then instead the rename product analytics and endpoints,
okay.
the GraphQL endpoints, so that we can filter those out in dashboard designer.
Yeah, that sounds good. And that
Sweet.
also gives, because that'll give us time to check in with analytics instrumentation group as well and see where they're at with like tracking app IDs and what we would need in terms of updating the setup project endpoint to like not produce the database already exists there and just say there's already an application ID here you go. So there's a little bit of buffer in terms of dependencies.
Cool.
So cool.
Awesome.
All right. Then James, you have the next couple points. We're
I
jumping
think back
around,
up to
but
point two.
yeah. Yeah.
The product analytics usage quota MVC. Hoping to get some engineers eyeballs on this to start to look at, especially what is our source of truth for event volume, and how we can then, that'll help us map then for the fulfillment side of things, how we're going to get that over into customers dot or Zora or wherever it needs to go as we get to that billing component. So mostly that is what I'm interested in, but overall looking at the existing open questions, the assumptions that we've made within that epic description, and calling out where there are gaps that we need to get filled in before we can go ahead and move forward with the MVC. And thank you,
Got
Dennis,
it.
for tagging some folks in there to take a look.
Yeah, and I might be, this is probably because we have the difference between the usage quota and the billing side of things. I know we had a little bit of some prior investigation from Max and then I think Khalil as well. And I don't know that that's transferred back to this issue. So really, I don't know if it's just front end that I should be pinging here. It should just be everybody. But I think,
I tagged in the proposal the link to that discussion,
yeah,
but I didn't explicitly call out, hey, this was already discussed here. So in
right.
proposal for the Epic, there is a bullet point that links back to that product analytics billing MVC implementation issue 419408. And there's a
Yeah.
lot of discussion there about where that source of truth will lie.
Yeah, I mean, and I think this comes out of our previous discussion, James, about like moving that conversation back to usage quota because that's going to be the first thing we're going to need to work on first before we, and that will, like you meant, to your point, outline what needs to be done when we work with fulfillment and getting the billing side of things sorted. But like we still need to show event usage and things like that. So I know the conversation started. So basically, we should bring that back. And then this issue needs eyes from both front end and back end. So I'll just ping everybody on that one. So cool. But thanks
And
for the
we can
reminder.
use the summarized discussion to bring that in a nice little paragraph.
Yeah, I mean that's actually that's a good point. We should try that. For those watching the call later on, the general idea is that we need some way to query all the ClickHouse databases to see like how many events total have we processed effectively. Anything in ClickHouse has been processed, and where do we store that data? Ideally, I think one of the core principles is that we want GitLab.com or the GitLab instance to be the source of truth for that, and then that can then push to eventually, if once we get into the billing MVC, the fulfillment flow of reconciling like billing and things like that. But we need to put things in place. And I think the configurator is going to become more than just a configurator in that case, where it's a kind of a cluster management service, if you will, where yes, it can manage the ClickHouse databases and the server itself, but also needs to do some reconciliation. Because ideally, if we we can get deeper into it once we actually have some engineers looking at the issue. But we want to maybe do some batch processing or do some aggregating so that when the GitLab instance does call for that usage data, that we can very efficiently send that over. But we'll have some good discussions out of that. Just wanted to recap that. Cool. Back to you,
My
James.
next point is read only, but I will say it out loud anyway. Take a look at the issue for brainstorming, thumbs up ideas that you like or add new ones. And I think we've talked through Jan's issue around the current GraphQL stuff.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, so
back down to number 5 for you, Dennis, unless there's more in 4 you want to talk about.
No, I think we're good as far as everything else up to point 5. I had an issue at a point just to kind of get some clarification from infrastructure. I think Noel's said accepted, but he's not here. But anyone from infrastructure to be able to maybe you're watching the recording, just to kind of better understand like what needs to be done. I know we've had this infrastructure support issue. I know we've got something like we want to get the everything organized and set up so that we can deploy the staging and production and all that kind of stuff. But it's not clear what is like the top, what do we actually have to, what are the work items that will help us get to that definition of done. I've pinged Pierre and Mel's on that, and I'm just trying to get some clarification on that, just in terms of so we understand what has to be done, and we can also make those calls and maybe kind of work with figuring out if certain things can be scoped out to be able to get it to help better facilitate a production launch sooner rather than later, so we can onboard some external customers. So if you're watching the recording or the agenda, would appreciate ideally in the issue a response in terms of just like what actually needs to get done and how I could potentially or anyone else can potentially help with that as well. So yeah, that's my point for that. And then the last item is, I think we already spoke about it, Alan. Is there anything you wanted to speak to about that, or did we cover the resetup issue? All right.
I think we're good.
Then, awesome. Then we are at the end of the agenda. I don't really have anything for show and tell, but I'm hoping by next week I can show and tell GitLab.com data being connected and coming through, and hopefully not blowing up our second, cluster. But it'll be exciting to see how that all works out. But anything else anyone would like to discuss? All right. It's good to see you too. Have a good rest of your days and weeks. And see you in the next one.
See you later, guys. Cheers.